you can heal your body in yoga because of the way we use activated asana, right? Because the resistance, like the body doesn't know if you're using your own weight, or you're picking up a kettlebell, or you're picking up a barbell, or you're pulling on a rope. Your body doesn't know what you're doing. All it's picking up on is like the resistance. It's how hard do my muscles need to turn on in order for me to do this thing I'm asking my body to do. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's just talk about some ways that you can use your own body weight in activated asana, or the other tools that we use in the yoga class, that would provide sufficient stimulus for adaptation. Does everybody understand what I'm saying right now? Sufficient stimulus. Like, what would be, say you had SI joints that were unstable. And the recommendation is to do some resistance training to strengthen. Number one, what would we need to strengthen?
I would say like the glutes.
Yeah. Glutes. Yep.
And the back side of the body. I mean, automatically I think of like fierce angel pose or something like that, where you're activating the whole posterior chain.
Posterior chain. Yeah. So like superficial backline structures. Definitely glutes, but those the psoas.
Yeah, because that attaches to lumbar.
Yeah. It attaches as a guy wire, but if the muscles, and this is often the case, that are on the backside are weak, then the psoas usually, is doing all the work of stabilizing, and so it's usually over recruited. So the primary focus would need to be the backside, and just making sure that psoas isn't by being hyperactive or whatever, which you can pretty much do as long as, like, if you do something in a neutral position, like Wendy suggested in, intense healing pose, that long held isometric. But you guys are on the right track. So it is the back chain. It's those, the deep six, external hip rotators, which, we activate when we're organizing and activating. And so like, say, what are the things, like, let's, I think this is a useful place to go as well. Like, what are the things that might cause SI joint instability? If we're thinking about things getting overstressed, stretched, and weak.
Over twisting without activation. I'm trying to think, because I have SI problems, and I'm thinking, when does that bother me? And for me, twisting, particularly on one side.
You mean like a seated twist or standing twist?
I mean, just like
a
always favoring one side twisting, but like in a passive manner. I always.
Oh, any passive twisting, yeah. Like even in seated twist, because the lower body is really grounded and kind of rooted. And then people go into like a seated twist where they can use leverage from their arms. If they're doing it passively, they can bring the rotation right down into the SI joints, which it shouldn't be. So you can adjust the pelvis so you're not bringing the torque down there, because you mainly want it in the thoracic spine and the cervical spine, which is where we're trying to maintain rotation. We don't have a lot of rotation in the lumbar spine, and that's not a big part of its function. We need stability there. So so that is a place where you could, over time and with, passive stimuli, cause some instability. What are some other things? Okay, go ahead, Angela.
Any kind of extreme, or not extreme for some people, external hip rotation, especially both hips at the same time, as I discovered 2 Mondays ago. So yeah.
Okay, so like in Mandukasana or something like that.
Mandukasana,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was a
Mm-hmm.
pose.
Yeah.
Mhm. So
Okay, cool.
that's niggling. My left SI joint is now niggling again, and it hasn't been niggling for ages. So
Mm-hmm. Okay. But Mandukasana, if you're activating into the floor,
yeah,
different pose.
Yeah.
If you're like
True.
trying to, sort of doing it like frisky pigeon, where you're literally trying to
Mhm.
lift the pelvis away from the floor
Mhm.
in that pose. Yeah, now
Mhm.
you're really strengthening the deep front line, so. Mhm.
And that wasn't my class, by the way. I was
I
a
know.
student in a class
Yeah, Angela
when that happened.
sacrificed her body on the altar of higher education by taking somebody else's class.
Never again.
Go ahead,
Anyway,
Dina.
What about forward in a standing position, forward flexion at the hip and then rising back up? Even if it's not in a wide leg stance, even if one foot is in front of the other, if you're not grounded in the feet, either pressing down and apart with the feet in a wide forward fold, or in, let's say, crescent lunge, bending forward. If you're not pressing the foot down and forward, you take the whole, all the pressures in your lower back. But immediately, if you turn on the quads and the hips, you feel nothing in your lower back. So I wonder if that has anything to do with SI joint instability. If you're not active,
Yeah, I would
rising.
say passive forward folds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when in the manual of the teacher training that I took, they talked about Paschimottanasana and how to, when you run out of hip flexion, how to get a little bit more forward flexion from the SI joints. So, because, like your pelvic, so you're in basically this position. Here's your butt. And now the sacrum is, stationary, and you can still get a little tiny bit more forward fold movement from the SI joints. So that was actually taught as a way to increase the depth of your forward fold, as though there, why is that a goal? I don't understand that. That's so confusing to me. So why are we exploiting the SI joints, for a reason like that? But when you see, it's so easy for students and you see yoga teachers who are being trained that way to to think that they're, I don't know, is that where the golden ring is or something, where you have to get the deeper and deeper and deeper forward fold. So I would say whether that's a seated forward fold or even a standing forward fold, which, a standing forward fold, you need more muscles turned on. But I still don't think, unless you're intentional about it, you're going to turn on enough so that there isn't like a unsupported load on the sacroiliac joints. You can load them with support, which again, as part of the full chain when you're organizing and activating. And then hey, no problem. You're just making the tissue stronger. You're not cranking on it and separating joint surfaces. I mean, the SI joint is an interesting joint anyways, because it's part synovial and part fibrous. So it does have that little bit of wiggle room, the nutation and counter nutation. So, it does have a little bit of wiggle room, but we don't want a lot there. It's just literally to have that slight bit of give, just like at the knee joint, which is a modified hinge joint. It's got about 5 degrees of rotation at the knee. It's just that little bit of extra wiggle room. If you got too much wiggle room, now you've got an unstable joint. Oh, so, if you take your knee and you torque your knee all the time, like in passive pigeon or something, or lotus pose, you're going to have too much rotation now. And that knee is going to be unstable. And this is the same thing with the SI joint. If you're going into that wiggle room and pressing into it, then you could end up with a little too much wiggle room, and now it's unstable. So, and the way you would do that is, as we've already mentioned, with forward folding, twisting postures where you're not allowing the pelvis to move into the twist with you. I think that's a more clear way of saying it. But you can also do it in staggered leg stances, like Trikonasana with a rotation, right? rotated trikonasana. You guys do that pose? Yeah, so that's one where you could do, and various split leg poses, like even deep lunges. Again, if you're, a lot of these split leg poses, if you're doing them passively, that's where the problem comes in. If you're doing it actively, if you're pressing into the feet and you're dialing out, you can't exploit that joint, because it's getting swept up into the tension of that fascial line, and it's held, you know, it's behaving as a tensegrity, and you just can't hinge on it like you can in a passive posture. So that's kind of what makes all the difference. So those are reasons why you would get that kind of instability. So we would shore up that joint, we would re-strengthen it, reconnect it by doing resistance, if you want to call it resistance training, but it could be just body weight training. This is what I want to really drive home. Yes, you could pick up heavy weights if you want, but if you're picking up heavy weights and you're not organizing and activating, you might just exacerbate the problem. You know, weight training takes quite a lot of awareness and precision, because now you're loading your position. Okay. Whereas if you're doing it with your own body weight, there's sort of fail safes built in. As long as you know, you have to be active, you have to organize and activate. So let's talk about a couple more poses that we could do for creating stability, strength, awareness, proprioception, etc., deep fascial tone around, in the area where the SI joint is. Again, we have to, also, I want to encourage you to just not think of the SI joint just in isolation. That is kind of the thinking when we're focused on stretching, but when we're focused on strengthening, we have to think about the whole chain. I hope that also makes sense.
Well, I'd suggest intense healing pose to train to a couple more minutes. And then I would do, because that really helped me, I would do some touchdown or hinging exercises on one leg. You're touching down, just the other one, the hind leg doesn't have to be straight at all. You just can do it in whatever way. And so just touching down like this, just hinging the hip, but then also opening the hip, like finishing on a touchdown, and then opening the hip and closing the hip, like control movements through the joint without breaking down. Because this hinging stuff, for people who have SI joint instability and rather weak glutes, it's really difficult, and you will feel it immediately.
Yeah, 100%. Let's spend a little bit of time on this. So let's prioritize an unstable SI joint. I think intense healing pose, number one. Isometrics, always number one. Isometrics. What's another isometric that's brilliant for this issue? Go ahead, Wendy.
Well, I don't know if it's brilliant, but
we'll be the judge of that.
So I have been having an issue that just started maybe in November, December with my SI joint. And I go to bed at night in supta, what's it called? What's it when your soles of your feet are together and you open your knees?
Supta Baddha Konasana.
Supta Baddha Konasana, thank you. I'm gonna jumble that one. And I go to sleep like that because I like the stretch in my hip. And I think that's what's caused my SI joint now to be irritated, because it's passive weight, just opening.
Over a long period of time.
Over a long period of time and over years. I just love, like.
Oh, you've been doing this for years.
Yeah, I go to bed.
You need to stop that.
I have.
Okay,
So,
well, put a pillow under your knees.
I do.
Okay.
I do. I've got it all figured out, but mostly because of what I'm learning here, right? So what I do in class as well is I love this pose. I mean, like I said, I don't know if it's brilliant, but I do one one-legged stand where I bend my right leg, for example, and I hold the right hand on the right knee and I actively press into the leg and hold that for 5 breaths. And then I do it the opposite way where we press it inward.
Yes.
And so both ways. And then, that sort of thing. And then we do a twist and I do the same thing where you
Yeah.
hold it. So just variations of the pose, but you're still doing the same hold.
Yeah.
And I've been doing all these things and it's not getting worse. So I think I'm catching it before it's getting, before it gets worse.
That, I think what you're talking about, a lot of it is in the single legs magic. In the Activate Your Asana, single legs magic. Now, the only issue I have with that, Wendy, is that you're kind of in an end range position on the leg with the hip and knee flex, so the lifted leg. So when you're trying to make something get better, rehabilitate, you stay in a more neutral position.
So how is that end range?
On the lifted leg.
Yeah.
It's closer to the end range, on the flexed hip.
So, but I'm not doing this. I'm keeping it just here.
Yeah.
So this is end range? This isn't end range?
For say piriformis, the deep hip rotators, right? Because for them to be in their shortened position, you'd be externally rotated. So they're closer to the midline of the body, which is closer to their end range. Just in terms of like, you want to do that.
Okay.
But I just want to tell you this. Intense healing pose, your hip is neutral. What's another neutral pose anybody can do? Super effective. Yes. Bridge. Bridge is a very, very potent pose. You can work so hard in bridge pose. If you want, you could put strap just above the knee, circle the strap, right? Make a loop with your strap, put it just above the knee joint, go into little bridge and dial out into that strap, just like you would do in, chair pose or whatever. And that is very, very effective for this. And then you can go into putting a block between the knees and stuff like that. But the tissue that needs the stimulus is that the lateral lines and the spiral lines. And that would catch all the structures of those lines. Go ahead, Dina. Oh, you're still muted, my dear.
What about tabletop position, opposite arm, opposite leg extended at end range?
Yeah.
And then from there, you can isolate and just hold it. You can also maybe just lift up and lower, or perhaps bring elbow to knee. I think those are great.
Draw a little square with your lifted toe behind you.
Mm-hmm.
So that also, you see, is in a neutral hip position. But you guys all know, right? We're just saying intense healing pose. If you've experienced it, you know that's doing something. Same thing with, the bridge poses. Like, you can really do intense. Like, again, if you're trying to create sufficient stimulus for adaptation in a very safe way, you don't even have to pick up a weight. Isometrically, you're doing isometrics, and Wendy, your single leg standing balance, another lovely isometric. Again, this is a little bit further down the road in the healing response, a little bit further because your hip's not in neutral, it's flexed, but it's great. I love it. Your standing leg is also working isometrically, so the standing leg is getting great stimulus for securing the SI joint. And then what Bianca suggested, the touchdowns. Do you guys know what we mean by touchdowns? So so just imagine you're on your mat, you're standing on your right leg, your left leg is behind you. You're going to hinge at the hip. So that means you're not bending anything except the motion that's going on at the hip joint. You reach down to touch your mat, keep your trunk neutral, and you stand back up again. So you're just going down and up. One leg is behind you, right? And you're going down, touching down. That's why they're called touchdowns. So you just reach down, touch with your fingers without putting any weight down, and stand back up. So you're hinging. Oh, Sarah, you can show us. See how she's hinging? She's keeping her trunk neutral. Thank you, Sarah. So she's got one leg that's going to go behind, but she's reaching her hands down for the mat there. So you touch down and you stand up. Okay. Is that clear?
Yeah. What about good mornings? Do you know what those are?
Isn't that with just 2 feet on the ground?
It's 2 feet, but I, because of what I've learned from you, I have them put the hands
Oh,
behind the
yeah.
head, press the head into the hands and the hands into the head. So we're turning on the back line, and then the feet dialed out or pressing down and apart, you lower halfway and come up
Yeah.
like that.
I, again, in favor of that, but that is, again, we're doing this in order of like, what's going on in your response, right? In the tissue
Mhm.
response, that would be also something coming on a little bit later. So
Mhm.
around the same time that you're able to do touchdowns, then the good mornings would be good. So any kind of active hip hinging, where there's isotonic, so you're moving in and out of the position, so moving through a range of motion. Yeah. And then Sarah's suggesting planks as long as a neutral spine can be maintained. I find planks, yeah, like planks are interesting because you can do them where they're just totally front body focused, pushing into the toes and hands and like, hollowing the body a little bit, super front body focused. But if you can turn all that on and then start squeezing your glutes like mad, then it's like very good work for all those pelvic muscles. So yeah, go
There's
ahead, Sarah.
actually more of a variation that I do that mimics walking actually in the plank position. As long as you can stay neutral, you lift up your foot one at a time, like an inch off the ground, very, very, very slightly, and that does activate the back chain.
Nice.
The hip and stuff. And then you can also do that with side plank. You can lift a leg, lift a leg, lift a leg. It's quite challenging. Lots of people with acute back problems have trouble stabilizing in one of those 4 positions, because you do it forward with your legs up and down, you do it on your hands dialing out, and you try and lift again without shifting, no butt lift, no nothing, you just try and stay neutral. And that's the hard part, right? Because lots of times when we lift our legs, our hips will shift, but then that's the wrong kind of stimulus that we're trying to teach the body. We're trying to teach it to hold in neutral while we move our legs and arms and all that kind of stuff. So by doing these planks, with the moving of the legs, but keeping the spine neutral, that's giving the correct neural input.
And see, she's just describing, we're just using a mechanical disadvantage.
Yes, and then the
to
same in the
up the
bridge
ante.
pose. You could have a long lever bridge or a short lever bridge with the legs.
Yeah.
And same thing, you can lift your leg at one at a time, very like an inch off the ground, not like a foot, like an inch. And just the control that you need to do that, to not have the pelvis rock side to side, can be quite challenging for people.
Yeah. So again, see, we can easily come up with things that we can do in the practice without picking up any weight, and you will provide sufficient stimulus in the correct position, right? I mean, you can, I'm sure there's ways of cheating, but we're talking about, using good form and good technique, and you can, give great stimulus. So, and the other really cool thing about using our own body and body position and mechanical disadvantage for resistance is that, you always have your body with you. And it's a way for your nervous system to know your body, to always like know, what's going on in this body. And that's very important. Like, just again, like if you stop going into certain corners or doing certain movements or whatever, you start to lose awareness. And I mean, that has such an impact on the kind of activities your body's willing to do. Go ahead, Sarah, you had a bit more.
Yeah, 100%. I used that strategy a lot when I worked in the physio department, because of the brain and the pain connection. As soon as there's pain in the body, the brain will almost like forget about that body part so that you don't feel as much pain. So if we can kind of remind the brain body connection to that hurt body part, you'll heal faster, you'll feel better, it'll come online quicker. All those things I've seen over and over and over for ankle sprains, for SI joint, for lots of different things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, originally, the pain is a call for attention, you know, and we can't, like Sarah said, you don't want to like forget about that body part, because like, of course, like pain avoidance is, you know, it's like a deeply rooted impulse in our body, but you know, it does lead to a lot of dysfunction. So we want to keep revisiting it and just checking in and feeling and letting ourselves feel, and that can reduce the fear. So that's an important aspect of any healing response, you know. So Angela, like, make sure you're giving your grumpy SI joint attention. Tell it how much you love it, and you know it's going to heal just fine. Okay.
Can I just ask, can you
Do.
just clarify in order, if you were working with somebody with an unstable SI joint, what your go-to? So we've intense healing pose, bridge, what else in order of kind of progression, what you would do?
I'm going to want to just keep adding things now, but I would also do Fierce Angel for this issue.
Fierce Angel.
But I think we said Bird Dog as one. Planks would be another one. You could, with Bird Dog, you could do it isometrically, or you could introduce some movement with it. Plank with your butt squeezed. The single leg standing balance, which, you know, is also isometric, but again, it's just more of an like in I don't want to say end range, because I know for most of you that's probably not nowhere near your end range, but it's still closer to the end range than a neutral hip. And then we did touchdowns, and then good mornings.
Okay.
All right. And again, that's not an exhaustive list, but it's something.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I just really wanted that to land. Just so that you know, because I just got the feeling from a couple of comments that I saw in the website that, you know, if the concept you can agree with, that you need to do some kind of resistance to dig yourself out of that hole that gets created from overstretching. You know, you need some kind of the exact opposite stimulus. You can to contract muscles and fascia, but you don't have to do it necessarily with weights. There are other ways of doing it. We have lots of tools in the yoga realm. So it doesn't mean like, okay, leaving yoga to go do something else, although you're welcome to. But I just want you to know, like, we do have very potent tools with, you know, using our own body weight and, you know, applying the things that we know, right? Isometrics and mechanical disadvantage. And those are very, very effective. Okay, so then there's one other thing